What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Potter, senior team writer at BamaOnLine.com, and I'm here with Tim Watts, site publisher, and Andrew Bone, our recruiting editor, and we're here to talk a little NFL draft. It was another big year for Alabama. They had 7 guys drafted in the 7 rounds of the draft. I think that's 14 drafts in a row with at least 7 players drafted. Just an impressive run from Alabama. We'll run through them real quick here. Tyler Booker was first off the board at number 12 overall to the Cowboys. He was very happy when that pick came down. Bear hugged Jalen Milroe and carried him a little bit there in the green room. Then Jihad Campbell to the Eagles at number 31. No second-round pick, but Jalen Milroe came off the board next in round 3 at 92 to the Seattle Seahawks. Next, you had a couple fourth-round picks with Malachi Moore to the Jets at 130, and then at 134, Q Robinson to the Broncos. Round 5, you had Rob Utes, another Seahawk there, with pick 175, and then rounding out the group was Tim Smith to the Colts at 190 in round 6. And just some notes there, 17 straight drafts for the first-round pick. That extends Alabama's NCAA record. You've had at least one first-round offensive lineman in 6 of the last 7 drafts. That's an impressive run. Malachi Moore gives you 1 DB in 14 straight drafts. I know that makes Nick Saban happy. And then your last 5 starting quarterbacks have all gone within the first 2 days of the draft. Just a remarkable run by Alabama in the NFL draft. And we're going to go through some topics here, some categories, I guess, just kind of breaking down the draft. And I want to start off just with your favorite pick. I know that you had 7, and there were 3 guys that were undrafted free agents. We'll get to them in a little bit. But of the 7, Tim, and favorite, it could be best fit, just the guy that you liked during the recruiting process or whatever. What was your favorite Alabama pick these 3 days here in the 2025 NFL draft?
I mean, I think value-wise, it's Jihad Campbell. I mean, I feel like, there's so many stupid NFL teams. There's a reason they consistently draft in that top 10, and there's a reason the Eagles are drafting in the bottom 4 of these last, for so long. And to get him, and, the thing about Jihad is that, one, he's not your traditional inside linebacker. This isn't a guy that's just going to go, find ball, get ball between the tackles, between the guards. He's a guy that can go outside and rush the quarterback. He's going to be a guy that can play in space. And I feel like he's just tapping into what he's going to become. I feel like he's just now reaching in that big glow up this year. Obviously, I thought the Eagles, we talked about it. We've got a pretty good Eagle fan base, and congratulations to them on the BOL roundtable. And I said it the whole week, if the Eagles getting him, I'm quitting or I'm fighting them. And he just walked right to the Eagles, and, congratulations. He's going to be right at home with all those Alabama people and, Georgia guys he's going to know. So it's a perfect fit for him, and a great job by the Eagles.
Yeah, it's like they can't keep getting away with this. The Eagles just sit there, and then an amazing player falls into their lap. And I know there was some talk about concerns with his shoulder. He had a great combine up in Indianapolis, and then we saw him, I think, at Alabama's pro day. He was actually at the facility before that, and he had a big sling and brace on his shoulder. So he had some surgery, and I think that was something that maybe resulted in a little bit of a fall. But to fall to the Eagles, being a New Jersey kid, I mean, you can't really ask for much more than that. What about you, Andrew? Was there a pick that stood out to you the most that maybe was a favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're watching the draft and you see where guys are going, you don't really study some of these teams that much because you don't know who's on their team, who left during free agency. But once I studied a little bit, looked back, I like the Malachi Moore pick to the Jets because you just hire a new head coach and Aaron Glenn, defense coordinator Steve Wilkes, and secondary coach is Chris Harris, who played a long time in the NFL. So you got a lot of NFL, not head coaching experience, but NFL experience, guys that have played in the league for several years. So I like that pick, especially with the depth issues in the New York Jets secondary, especially at safety. Is a guy that has played a lot of college football at the University of Alabama, and big leader for the team, and walks into a Jets organization that's got a lot of fresh faces, and I think he's going to have a chance to. He may not start right away, but I think he's going to be able to contribute pretty early in his career. So I really like that pick for Malachi.
One of the cool things about that is Aaron Glenn was just the defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, and I think in one of his press conferences he was talking about how he reached out to Brian Branch about Malachi. So he has that relationship there, because people forget that Brian Branch was kind of in line to start as a true freshman. he got banged up, and that opened the door for Malachi Moore. So did his homework there, and that's a pretty cool connection for me.
Not only
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. And Malachi was a late entry and starting
Yep.
as a freshman. So we kind of, he went from a mid-year to coming in the summer. And that, usually sets him back for him to jump right in. And you're right. Branch had all the hype, but Malachi jumped in there pretty quick.
Yep.
No, really cool to see. And another guy too that was at Alabama for a while that for me I think was my favorite pick. It's just because he waited his turn. Then you saw his senior year get cut short by injury was Q Robinson to the Broncos there in round 4. I don't want to say that surprised me in the sense that he went that high, but he didn't have to wait too long for a guy that really only has 1 year of production from a first team standpoint. But I think, we heard it throughout his career. I think Nick Saban called him one of the best special teams players they've ever had. It's just his willingness to do whatever to get on the field and help the team. So I've always liked the Broncos back to the Terrell Davis days, and to see a guy like Q Robinson, who not only stuck it out at Alabama, but was great with the media. Even when he was banged up, he would pop his head into the Mount Moore, the media room up there, and just say hello. You're always rooting for guys like that. So that one for me, multiple layers there, but it was a favorite pick. What about a surprise, guys? There was a lot of surprises in the draft, not just from an Alabama standpoint. But when you look at this, was there anything that surprised you from the Alabama contingent, Tim?
Booker going at 12. I mean, Q Robinson, to me, been told he's a 5th or 6th, maybe an undrafted free agent. But if you're going to have one skill set in the NFL, it's getting to the quarterback, and they're going to find you. And he had that. But Booker going at 12 was nice because the build up and lead in was he could fall to the second, and he's an interior offensive lineman. That's not out of the realm of possibility. We see those guys fall in the second round, go on to outstanding careers. But I think Booker, just the whole thing from start to finish, draft, his reaction, the way he was dressed, how happy he was. He tried to break Roger Goodell's ribs, which I appreciate with that bear hug. I mean, that whole thing. I mean, him and JC Latham, I'm sure y'all saw that video, back and forth celebrating, because Booker did that for Latham last year. Then Latham did it this year for Booker. But to me, maybe, I don't know if it's a reach or not, because there's really no reaches. I mean, if he turns out to be a Pro Bowl player, it's definitely not a reach. But the Cowboys to get him, and I got to think that's an exciting place to play. I know as a NFL fan, we're always dogging the Cowboys. Our message board's full of them, but it's the Dallas Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to resonate with Booker, and he certainly seemed excited to be going there. So that's a great moment.
No, yeah, he was super excited, and it is interesting. Like I get what you're talking about from a surprise standpoint, because you don't really see guards go that high in the draft. Like you think tackle, pass rusher, not guard, off ball linebacker. The value there. It makes sense for a surprise. What about you, Andrew? Was there something that surprised you from this draft from an Alabama standpoint?
Yeah, I think, and we had kind of talked about it earlier, was Jalen Milroe. I think his draft selection by the Seahawks, not saying that I was surprised that he went in the 3rd round, but I think some of the other quarterbacks that got drafted after him. I look back at I always kind of look back at the recruiting side of things, and I remember he was committed to Texas for almost a year, and then reopened things. He reopened things because Quinn Ewers decided to transfer from Ohio State to Texas, kind of in that same class. And a lot of people in Texas were really excited about that. They didn't care about Jalen Milroe. Quinn Ewers was going to be the kind of the savior of the Texas program and lead them to 3 or 4 straight national championships. And then Jalen Milroe has a good career in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa, and then he gets drafted ahead of Quinn Ewers in the NFL. So I thought that was something that stood out. Obviously, gets drafted ahead of Shedeur Sanders. I don't think anyone expected that. I saw a funny interview the other day. It was from Delaney Walker and Will Compton on Bussin' with the Boys from 3 or 4 months ago. Delaney Walker said he did not expect Shedeur Sanders to go in the top 2 rounds, and he expected him to go in the 5th round. Of course, they told him he was crazy. Bet him like $1,000, and he was like, "I'll take that bet all day long." But I would not have expected that. I would have told him he was crazy too, because everybody had Shedeur going in that 1st or 2nd round. But I think Jalen going 3rd. I think he was the 4th quarterback taken in the draft. So good for him. And, hopefully, he goes into a situation where he can learn. He can sit behind Sam Darnold and be in a quarterback room where he can hopefully develop and, hopefully get put in some situational plays this fall and run the ball and get some touchdowns in.
That's a good point about Arnold. You're talking about a guy that went through trials and tribulations. You remember his rise up at USC. All of a sudden was at the Rose Bowl, blew up. Next thing you know, he's high draft pick. A failure's not going to make it. Bounced around a little bit. Now the starting, thing for the Seahawks. So he's got a wealth of experience to teach Jalen. That's a really good guy to be sitting behind. I agree with you.
No, it's the quarterback room now because you looked at it going into the draft. They had 3 guys that you're familiar with, at least if you follow the NFL and college football, because you had Darnold. They brought in Drew Lock again, who's familiar with that Seahawks organization. They had Sam Howell, who started some games for the Commanders, and they traded after they picked Jalen Milroe. They traded Sam Howell to the Vikings, who needed some quarterback depth. So now he's QB3 in that organization, and we'll see if they have any kind of packages for him, because I think that's something that you could do. But it's a situation where Jalen doesn't have to come in and start right away, and I think that's great for him. He can continue to develop. And I know it was a thing on the message board. It was a thing everywhere. I don't really know why people watch ESPN when they're doing the draft or watching the draft. I watch the NFL Network, or I'll have ABC on to hear what Nick Saban says about some of these picks. But what did you guys think of Mel Kiper's meltdown with the Shedeur Sanders stuff?
I mean, Reese Davis comes off as a pretty chill guy, right? We know a lot of people that know him. He's relaxed. I think he was a second from walking over and choking Mel Kiper out. I mean, he was red in the face trying to keep his composure. What pisses me off is that there are dozens of guys getting drafted, and he is talking about Shedeur Sanders while they're getting chosen. Their entire life working for that moment. And this guy's telling the NFL they're stupid. Yeah. Stupid's ESPN for letting this guy act. I mean, everybody on the panel's arguing with him, and to act like that. And he fell. That's a fact. It's not debatable. And I just thought he ruined a lot of kids' moments. He needs his ass kicked for that. He should have let you say your stance once. Even in the write-up on ESPN, Mel Kiper is going through giving grades. Saints grade. Oh, they should have taken Shedeur over the kid from Louisville. He's just mentioned him in everything. It's ridiculous. It's not fair to everybody else.
He sounded like his agent or his dad rather than than an ESPN analyst.
Yes, for sure.
Well, I will say we're still talking about it on Monday morning, and I know it was all over social media. For this age and in media to get clicks and eyeballs, Mel did his job. I think maybe they were in his earpiece saying like, "Hey, Shannon Sharp's in the gutter right now. We need some publicity," and maybe that's what he
Mel
did.
might have with Shannon.
Yeah.
I mean, if that had been planned for clicks, I'd applaud it. I don't think it was, though. I don't either. Yeah. I mean, they were trying to – the argument with Reese was kind of funny because Reese is going, we're not arguing whether he's talented. He failed. Now he's got to deal with it. It was just – I mean, that to me, it's all – that draft's about everybody. It's not about one person. And what we came out of that draft, remembering, is where Sanders got drafted and Mel Kiper. And that's not what the draft is. I'm watching on NFL Network. But every time my friends are like, turn it to ESPN, I turn it to ESPN and he's going off again. And I said, I'm not going over there. Then they're sending me the tweets. That was a long tirade.
Did you have your Mel Kiper moment when the Saints drafted Tyler Shuck? How did you feel about that pick? I know you're a big Saints
guy. I don't know as much about him. He's 26. It's the Saints. I mean, he's 26 years old.
He's older than Blake.
Yes. Well, I mean, so's everybody in that draft. I mean, you're not – yeah, everybody that got drafted is older, our boy Blake Byler. But he 20 – I mean, it is what, the Saints are. I mean, they're taking this shot. Kid's got arm talent, but he's got some of the worst gifts on Twitter I've ever seen. He's an older guy, obviously at 26. And I just feel like they had a lot more voids they could have filled. It's a 40th pick in the draft, by the way. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of other voids they could have filled and try to get to next year's draft, which looks a lot better. So, don't love it, but I mean,
I gotcha.
Well, kind of numb to it.
My surprise, I guess, was, and this isn't a knock on Robbie Utes by any stretch of the imagination. I thought Robbie had a place in the NFL, and it's actually interesting that when he was selected, when the Seahawks kind of put out their graphics for it, they listed him as a fullback. That's what they're kind of viewing him as, and he is a versatile player. But if you had told me there's going to be a tight end, only one tight end picked in this draft, I'd have probably thought it'd be CJ Dupree, just given his production. And he looks like an NFL tight end from a size standpoint. He went undrafted. So I think that's the biggest surprise to me. But again, Robbie going in the 5th round, teaming up with Jalen Milroe in Seattle there. Love to see it because Robbie, like all these guys, they were great with us from a media standpoint during their time at Alabama. And to see just a throwback player like Robbie Utes get picked in the 5th round, you love to see it. So that's where I would go from that. And then
he could have a great career as a fullback.
Yeah.
I can clearly see that with with Seattle. They're gonna have a running offense. I looked it up. They said they've got one guy that's also transitioning from tight end to fullback for this upcoming year. So there's going to be some competition. So he could easily he can win that job as a starting fullback right off the bat.
Could we see a combo of a power sweep with Robbie and Jalen?
Oof.
I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility. I feel like we've seen that before. On CJ, though, the one thing, you get to a point in that draft where being an undrafted free agent is actually better chance of making the team. It's probably a pride thing, but you can go where they need tight ends. Somebody drafts you in the 6th or 7th round, they've got 3 tight ends. That hurts you. But, I mean, he ended up with New England, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, New England, you got Drake May. They're going to need targets. I think CJ looks like an NFL tight end, low value guy. So he very well can make that team. I thought both of them landed in good spots.
I think that you can tell with New England that they're trying to put a lot of pieces around Drake May. They focus on the offensive line, wide receiver, running back. They really try to improve the offense. And to get a guy like CJ Dupree as an undrafted free agent, I think is big. And he's one of 3 guys. You had CJ going to the Patriots. You had James Burnip to Tim Saints. And then you had Nealon Hibbett, the long snapper, to the Dolphins. What did you guys think of those 3 pickups? Tim?
I love Burnip. I'm a Saints guy. I love my Burnip guy. It sounds like that quarterback situation, they're going to need him. That might have been their best pickup. So obviously I'm a big fan of that. And long snappers, I mean, they have a habit of making teams. They don't make a lot of money, and I don't think it's a big deal they're not drafted. I don't think if long snapper ever been drafted.
Yeah, like Thomas Fletcher got drafted.
That's right. I was about to say, I feel like there's one.
Was Cole Mazda drafted, or was he a free agent?
I think he got picked up by the Chargers as a free agent.
Yeah, those guys are highly valued by obviously by the NFL. Those guys run down and snapping the ball and all that stuff. He's gonna have a good chance, and he did a really good job at Alabama. I think the free agents went to good spots to make teams, so I feel like they have a pretty good shot. And again, you get to choose where you want to go. I mean, you lose money. There's a pride thing of not being drafted, but I mean, the NFL is peppered. If you go to any draft, the Wikipedia, and go down to the bottom, past the picks, it's the undrafted free agents. And there is a ton of guys you're going to be surprised, especially special teams that went undrafted. They ended up in Pro Bowls and won Super Bowls and stayed in the league 4 or 5+ years.
I thought Burnham was going to have a chance to maybe sneak in there, in that 6th or 7th round. I was kind of surprised he didn't, but at least he's going to have an opportunity. CJ Dupree, like we've talked about, really kind of surprised. I mean, because he put up some good numbers at the combine. And I thought those numbers were going to help him out a little bit, considering his size. Not a lot of productivity at Alabama, but still, was reliable in certain situations. So interested to see how he does in New England. Like you said, I mean, long snappers, you just kind of have to wait and see what how they do. But Alabama's had a pretty good run of long snappers making on NFL rosters the last 10 years.
They have, and that's the thing too. Like I thought CJ and Burnip were going to get drafted. Like Blake and I wrote stories for them. I thought Alabama would get 9 guys drafted. I thought that was the ceiling. But you look at this from a specialist standpoint, there's 32 of those jobs in the NFL. Most teams aren't carrying 2 kickers, 2 punters, 2 long snappers, things like that. They might have a long snapper on their practice squad just in case. But I think when you look at it, I think 2 kickers were drafted, 1 punter and 1 long snapper. There's just not a lot of opportunities. And The guys that were drafted had really good seasons. So right now, the only guy that entered the draft for Alabama that wasn't picked up was Graham Nicholson, and we'll see what happens there. That kind of sucks for the former Lou Groza Award winner. But we're going to transition a little bit because, it's another draft. If you're watching on ABC, you see Nick Saban for the first 2 days. I thought, once again, he did a great job, and I thought he handled the Shador stuff pretty well, all things considered, given what we were talking about earlier. But he had a couple interesting comments. Of course, what he said about Alabama's guys, that's all up on BOL, and he's going to speak highly of those guys. But he, talked about some guys that maybe Alabama didn't get. One that really made headlines was Mason Taylor, the tight end from LSU, who said that was the biggest recruiting mistake that they made at Alabama. And Andrew, I know that's something that you and I talked about. So when he says that, what came to mind for you? What did you remember about that process? What stuck out about that comment?
Yeah, you kind of look back, and a lot of those guys were in that 2021 class, which meant they went through the 2020 year, and a lot of them didn't get seen. They didn't get seen in camp. They didn't get seen in spring. But Mason Taylor was one of those kids that was in that following class. So he came to camp, got seen. He's son of Jason Taylor. Got offered during camp, but Alabama had their eyes on a couple other guys. Amari Knee-Black was a guy that they also offered in camp. Ended up getting a commitment from. And I think with Alabama, they couldn't take any more tight ends at the time, and they probably regretted not having a green light for Mason Taylor. And I'm not saying that he would have ultimately chosen Alabama if he did. Obviously, had a great career at LSU, but that was certainly a guy that stood out. And there were some others that I remember Alabama offering him, not really pushing for, or some guys that they really pushed for and missed out on. But him mentioning Mason Taylor and how it was probably the biggest recruiting mistake that they had made, especially considering some of those tight ends ended up transferring away from Alabama. I thought that said a lot about how Nick Saban obviously felt about Taylor.
I wonder if it factored in the fact that he and Jason Taylor were so close.
Mm-hmm. And Zach Thomas.
I think that had to factor in a little bit because they got Knee-Black and they got who's the other kid from Ohio,
Elijah Brown.
So
so Elijah Brown had actually committed last in the fall. So they had Elijah Brown, then they got Knee-Black. So they had 2 tight end commitments, and they weren't done at the tight end position, but they were going to wait a little bit longer before they took another guy.
And also you got to remember this guy was a low 3-star recruit. It wasn't like, you're out there with Eric Gilbert, a top 10 overall freak target. I mean, obviously the guy went to LSU, developed, not a surprise with that pedigree or that history. And I can see why he said that. I can think of some worse ones. I won't bring them all up, but I can think of some bad ones. So
I do think that him basically knocking them out of the playoff as a true freshman plays into that a little bit. I also think his relationship with his family has something to do with that too. You want to speak highly of a kid on this draft night, and having a relationship with Jason Taylor and Zach Thomas, who's his uncle. A huge NFL pedigree from that kid going to the Jets.
I imagine they told Nick, you need to take him. He's going to be good. I imagine he heard that a little bit,
Yeah. Now he's probably like, well, guess you guys were right.
Yeah.
When you're watching the draft, do you have any of those Nick Saban moments, though? I know you guys have covered recruiting for a while now. Like, do you see guys drafted and be like, oh, I remember that Alabama was close in that regard? Was there anybody that sticks out for you guys whenever you're watching this draft? I'll start with you, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, you see the names and you remember like, oh, crap, Bama brought him in I remember Luther Burden coming in for a visit and Bama saying we're not really that interested. I think he went early 2nd round. You see, I don't know how many defensive linemen Bama kind of was involved with. They all ended up at Texas A&M, ironically enough, and they might have got the best one. You see 2 Shamars, you see Walter Nolan. Bama was involved a little bit to some degree with all those guys, and obviously ended up with LT Overton, who could turn out to be the best of the bunch. But I see those names, and there's always – I tell you what was kind of surprising. I don't remember who all they were, but I was looking at a list of best available on the 3rd day, and there was a lot of 5-stars, guys that people really had a lot of anguished about, and how stupid are they for not going after this guy moments, not just Alabama fans, across the board with fans, and a lot of, oh, we got him, oh, we lost him moments, and guys that just, really didn't pan out. So I think, when you cover them, you're always looking at that. oh gosh, he was a 3-star and went first round, or oh crap, he's a 5-star and he's still available in the 6th.
What about you, Andrew? I know, like, you look at it, I don't know how closely Alabama was in the recruitments, but like guys going number 2, Travis Hunter, Will Campbell. There's guys that Alabama was in on in
And
this entire draft.
Will Campbell was certainly a guy that Alabama loved, had Alabama in his top 2, but it was very early in the process, and he made it very clear that he was searching for that LSU offer, and once LSU
Yeah.
was going to offer him, he was going to jump on board. And I actually posted on the BOL Roundtable yesterday, kind of in-depth look at all the guys that Alabama was really involved in with throughout their recruitment, or maybe some guys that they decided to pass on, including Quishon Junkins, out of Pike Road High School in Alabama. Of course, as Tim mentioned with Mason Taylor, he was kind of a low 3-star guy that just didn't have a lot of offers, and Alabama was searching elsewhere. But 2 guys that kind of came to mind when you mentioned that, Arian Smith, who was out of Florida, wide receiver, had Alabama, Georgia as his top 2 pretty much throughout his entire recruitment. Ends up obviously going to Georgia, but he was one of the fastest kids in the country. And then Wyatt Millam, who was also mentioned by Saban on draft night. I think he ended up going maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round, but offensive lineman out of West Virginia, attended Alabama's football camp prior to his junior year, and Alabama was in that top 2 with him heading into his junior season. And then after his junior season completed, he was scheduled to come back to Tuscaloosa that spring. COVID hits. Didn't come back to Tuscaloosa. Ends up staying home, committing to West Virginia. But those are 2 guys that I remember, pretty fondly, that Alabama was really involved with and heavily recruited.
One of the interesting things about Arian is we were told there was questions about his hands. I think those questions have been answered. They're not the best. And his speed and his size, we had people that thought maybe he could be a safety, that he obviously wanted to play wide receiver. But his hands were the question. I think he had some drops at Georgia, slipped to the 4th round, because with that speed, you expect him to go a little bit earlier. But that was a little footnote there. I think they probably had that one right.
It's funny because the West Virginia offensive lineman, Nick Saban, man, he doesn't care anymore. He's just up on ABC talking about how every year they tried to get him in the transfer portal. So little tamper and tide for your NFL draft. We'll put a bow on this with kind of, it's not really draft related, but it is news related because we know the transfer portal's closed. And Alabama had 0 players enter the portal. It's almost an unheard of statement in this day and age.
I can't be right, because I was told hundreds of times on the round table they're going to lose 6 to 8 more. They're not going to be near the 85. Where are they at, Charlie?
84.
84, and they're going to lose 6 or 7 more. It looked like they're going to need 15 players somehow. Obviously, they had a little bit of a plan, but I agree. The Testament, all the rumors, all the crap we've heard all year, the mass exodus. Good Lord, how many times I got to hear this term? You know what I mean? But what didn't want to play in the bowl game, everybody played in the bowl game. A lot of the juniors came back that you expected. Nobody hit that second portal window. I mean, obviously, I think the culture is pretty good there, and I think a lot of people have bought into what Kalen DeBoer is doing. I was a little upset. Andrew's like, Friday, the portal's closed, and I was thinking, like, they still got 48 hours to enter the paperwork. So I was waiting until Monday.
But we found out.
Yeah, we do.
Saturday morning that nobody had entered the portal, and that we were
pretty happy.
We're in the clear, and obviously you look back to December and January when we didn't really see your star players enter the portal. They stayed, and you kind of knew going through the spring. Of course, you kind of got scared when you saw the Nico stuff come out at Tennessee. Oh gosh, who's going to start asking for more money? You start thinking it in the back of your head. But for Alabama, not losing any of the players, and when you're on the 3rd team, exiting the spring, there's a thought that some of those guys might enter the transfer portal, and you might have to go try to backfill those guys, try to find some backups. But Alabama didn't have to do that. They could go out, get 2 tight ends, and they weren't looking for star players. They weren't looking to go out there and spend a ton of money to bring in a starting tight end. They were looking for guys for depth, looking for guys that can block, and they were able to do that. So a lot of credit to the coaching staff this certainly feels like Kalen DeBoer's team now. Guys that want to be here, guys that want to play for Kalen DeBoer, not just give them a test run and see how it works out. They want to be here, and I think there's a lot of confidence from this team heading into the summer and then obviously into the fall.
The first text I got the night before the portal was watch out for Austin Mack. Because, if you keep spitting, it's like saying 10 guys that might hit the portal. You doesn't have to have any rhyme or reason for it. You can throw the names out there. And, we've refused to speculate on stuff like that. And, unless we will say it's likely they hit the portal like we did with Darian Reed, but we're not just going to speculate. And to Andrew's point, we've been saying this a while. Everyone on this team has chosen to play for Kalen DeBoer multiple times at this stage. The commitment, the what is that? The winter portal, the spring portal. I mean, that's at least 3 times you've chosen to play for this guy. Many of them more than that. So obviously, this is his team.
Yeah, you had the 30-day window when he came in because of Nick Saban leaving. You had the spring window, you had a winter window, now you have another spring window. And they're the only team in the SEC without a scholarship player to enter. I think that says it says a lot, but it says a lot more than that. I think it's huge. And Andrew touched on it. They brought in a couple tight ends, Jack Samarco from West Virginia and Brody Dalton from Troy, because we've talked about it amongst the 3 of us, and then on the message board on the site, the tight end was the top priority in this spring portal window. And they went from 4 on campus to what will be 7 in the fall, addressing that room in a big way. And look, Brody Dalton's a productive guy. He's an in-state guy who's been to UAB and Troy. He's from Fife, Alabama, but he's a guy that's had some production from a receiving standpoint. And Jackson Marco's a huge tight end. That gives you an inline blocker. Both of those guys do. So
his high school video and that's just a year ago. He was latching on guys and taking them 30 yards downfield. Very aggressive. The one thing about both of them, very aggressive and physical blockers, which is what it's funny because all 3 of us said that's just what they're going for. Nothing big. They like their roster. And then you got to the point of, hey, Nico's in the portal. Will they go after him? It's basically every single human. And then when you get the inline tight ends are like, that's it. Like we literally said, that was the main thing. They weren't going after Travis Kelce or Gronkowski. And either, they needed somebody to get down there and get nasty and block for.
I did think that maybe they look at a punter just because they came out of the spring with that being kind of inconsistent. You have a true freshman that wasn't able to go through drills and Alex Asparuhoff, but the guys that were there weren't very consistent. And look, they have 1 scholarship available. Maybe they kick the tires on that down the road. But right now at 84, you feel like you're in a really good spot. And we'll close it out with this, Andrew. I know Tim touched on it. What do you think of these 2 tight ends?
I mean, I like them. Obviously, with Jackson Marco, there's not a lot of film outside of his high school film, but you got 2 guys that are physical, that are big, that are 250 pounds plus, that are going to be those inline guys that can block, that can get out there and eat some space. And they can also get out there and get to the second level. I think that's what I really like, especially about Brody Dalton. I think he can get down the field, and he's also going to be a weapon a little bit, probably more so like CJ Dupree in the passing game. I don't know if he's going to have 300, 400 plus yards, but when he needs to catch the ball, he's shown the capability to do that, and he was able to do that really on the back half of his season this past year at Troy. And he's going to want to make an impression this year because this would be a potential draft year for him. And he's certainly capable of potentially going in the later rounds next year. So we'll kind of like what we saw with Utes. So he's certainly wanting to have a big year in Tuscaloosa, but with the depth concerns with Alabama, these are guys that can come in and contribute in some sort of way.
And I'll tell you this, he's from Fife, and anybody that knows anything about Fife, they run the wing tee and they're tough as nails, and they win a lot of football games. So This is a guy that's going to walk straight in there and be willing to fist fight for every yard.
And he's an in-state commitment.
There you go.
Let's go.
Sound the alarm. I'll say this though. You look at
guys, they did now.
Yeah, you look at that tight end room though. Like really, you just have Josh Cuevas, who is your experience. You feel good about because Danny Lewis has played some football, but he missed the spring with an injury. He had surgery and missed all 15 practices. That's likely your number 2 guy. But beyond that, you have Jay Lindsey coming back, who hasn't played a ton of ball. I think they like both the freshmen, Marshall Pritchett and Caleb Edwards. But to add a guy like Dalton, who has 4 years of college experience, to go along with CJ Dupree, and then to add a big body in Jackson Marco, it just makes sense because, look, nobody's a Robbie Oots. I think he measured in at 6'3", 274 at the combine. That is a light tackle. But you got a guy like Samarco who's like 6'5", 6'6". I think some people have said he's up to 260 pounds. That fills a little bit of that blocking void that you need. So great pickups, great job by this coaching staff to keep the roster intact and not lose any guys to the portal. And another great year for the NFL draft. It's been a lot of fun to keep up with. Hope everybody enjoyed those threads on the message board. We got a lot of stuff coming this week with, how many guys are on rosters now. I think I counted it up last night. I think they're at 74. And that's still with guys like Amari Cooper, CJ Mosley. Those guys are free agents right now. So those guys will find their way onto rosters. Guys like Jed Wills. There's a lot of guys that are free agents right now. So they could probably get up to 80 if they get guys signed. But we'll keep up with that, guys, to look forward to next year's draft and a lot more on BOL. So keep it locked in. Give us a 5-star review, and we'll see you guys on the next show.